Hey, everybody, this is Grace, and I'm going to give a situation that happened to me about 3, 4 years ago, and see what would you have done in this situation. It was a really weird, odd, totally odd situation. So I'll get right to it. It was, I think I was at an interview not too far from here, and I went after the interview. I decided to take myself out to eat, and I was by myself. Nobody was with me. That's being by yourself. I went to this restaurant that I have been to several times with Adam, and it's a I think family owned restaurant, and I think they took an old Dairy Queen and bought it and remodeled it for home style cooking, really kind of laid back country kind of thing, and it's in a kind of somewhat like a small old downtown. And anyway, so I went there and it was packed as it always is. And no matter when I go, it's always packed. And they seat you, and the waitress, she set me in a it's like a room. It's kind of in the middle of it. It's very closed in, and I think that had like I think 3 or 4 booths on one side and maybe 2 on the other side, if at all. It was so small, and the door was it's just an opening, and then there's no. She set me at the back, and there was nothing behind me. Um, so I go in there, and I'm hungry. I just want to eat, and sit down. And she comes and she, takes my order, asks me what my drink is and everything. And she left, and it was like I said, the whole restaurant was packed. And all of a sudden, I notice, can't help but notice, in front of me, in the booth in front of me, is 2 young women. I'd say maybe mid 20s, and they had 2 small children. It was the one woman, and then next to her was I said a 2 to 3 year old. That's my dog. 2 to 3 year old boy, I guess their child, and then another woman, and then on the in a high chair was a baby boy, and very young baby boy. So I don't even think he was toddler yet. But anyway, I can't help but notice them because the baby starts screaming. Then the boy starts doing things like clanging, clanging stuff around and making all kinds of noise. And the women were both on their cell phones, and they were talking really loud because they were talking loud to be heard by the person on their, they were on cell phones with. So they were talking especially loud, and it just kept getting louder and louder. The baby screaming. They weren't taking care. Neither one of them was taking care of the babies, the children, and they were just screaming and making noise and everything. And I'm just sitting there going, "Oh my goodness." And behind them was a group of women who were a little bit older than I, and they were saying, "Oh, the poor baby," but these women were on their cell phones and talking louder and louder and louder. So the waitress, she came back and she asked me for my order, and I told her, and she heard it. She, she could hear the child, the children screaming. The whole restaurant could hear the child screaming. Okay, now I can say that I was getting a little annoyed. I'm quite annoyed actually, because they weren't paying attention to the children, and the children were screaming. And like I said, the door was just an opening. And on the other side of it was an elderly man. I don't know how old, but he was with somebody, and he was, he kept doing that. And these women were just kept talking on their cell phones. And the baby was screaming to the top of his lungs. And like I said, the child was just making so much noise. And they weren't stopping the children, or, take the child outside, something like that. So that man, that elderly man, was he was getting really upset, and I could hear him. He was so loud that he said, told the waitress, I'm not here to I'm here to eat. I'm not here to listen to children screaming and making noise, and the mom's not doing anything about it. And he just kept getting more and more vocal about it, and the moms were just on the phone. They didn't care, you know. But I'm sitting there, and I'm a little annoyed, and I did the same thing, like, like this. And they look up at me and give me a dirty look, like, who are you? And they're on the cell phone, so they can hear me. They're screaming, on the cell phones themselves. And they can hear me, and then so I got my cell phone and acted like I was calling somebody, which I wasn't going to do because I would be screaming too to be able to be heard. But, I mean, you would think somebody says, okay, somebody else is on a cell phone, let me quiet down myself a little bit. No, it was all about them. And so it just kept going on and on. Finally, it was so busy, it took the waitress a while to get back to me, with my order. And by that time, that elderly man that was just making such a ruckus, he said, "That's it. I'm not here to listen to this crap. I'm out of here." And he, left. Something like that. He was really mad. And I was pretty mad too. So I think, but the strange thing is the people behind them, the women, I said a group of women, and they were like, oh, poor them, oh, poor them. I think they must have been related or something, because the whole restaurant, you could tell the whole restaurant was upset. You know, other people were making the kind of clear their voice noises and stuff like that. So, but they were looking at me. They were facing me, these two young women, and they were giving me the dirty looks, okay? And finally, the waitress came back with my order, and I looked at her and I said, could you help me, you know, because she was delivering my meal. I said, could you instead help me move to another spot? And those women, you know, the two young mothers, they started saying, and they were really angry, you know, really angry that I would dare to move. Now, as you can imagine, I had to speak a little bit loudly so the waitress could actually hear me, to ask her to help me move to, you know, my stuff to another part of this restaurant. So they heard that, and because they were yelling, the children were yelling and everything, and I don't have a very high voice, so it wasn't all that much, but the one, I think there was no booths behind them except that group of women, and they were saying, well, some people, you know, well, the waitress helped me to move, and as I was walking by, those older women, they said, well, some people just don't understand about kids. And the two young women, the mothers of these children, I guess, they made some comment, you know, just real loud, yeah, she must not have kids, like that. And then it was like that whole room, there was only people in that room, like they were just bouncing off of one another. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, here is the thing, the whole rest, you know, it's not just me. I should not have had to deal with that at all myself. But the whole restaurant, you could tell, you know, as I was walking out, they were happy for me, you know, that I got out of that little hellhole, you know, is what it was like. With the babies screaming and moms yelling, you know, and all this stuff. So they put me on the other side, and I was upset. I really was. And I think they gave me my meal for free or something like that for what I had to deal with. But it was like, you know, seriously, how rude. And I mean, you have children, you can take them out of the restaurant and try to calm them down, or even just pay attention to the child, because they weren't even paying attention. They were, you know, both of them were on their cell phones. So I ate my meal, and I was real upset. And, you know, it was just an upsetting kind of thing, because the children were, you know, it's not the children's fault. It's the mother's fault. And they were screaming and screaming and banging and all this stuff. And so I hurried up and ate, and it was just an awful meal. And I got out the restaurant and got into my, I think, SUV, whatever I was driving at the time. And I got into it, and I noticed these young women running out of the restaurant with their babies. And they were running toward my car. I think it was a truck, SUV. So, you know, I have to watch for them so I don't run over them as I'm backing up, and they're screaming. And so I just get out of there, you know, without hitting anybody. And I'm going down the road, and they jump in their truck. They have a truck, above a truck. And they jump into it, and they're chasing me down the road, seriously. And it's real it winds around a lot and everything. And I'm driving and driving. Well, I had my cell phone, so I dug it out of my purse, and I called 911. I told them about it. And the woman on the phone, the 911, she said, nobody should have had to put up with that at that restaurant. And with them chasing, you should have called us when they started that in the restaurant. I was like, really? You know, I should have called you while I'm in the restaurant. Okay, so of course, you know, the 911 operator asked me to describe them, and I told her, you know, that they're basically, you know, they asked certain questions and said they're the same ethnic group as I. They were young, probably early 20s. The babies, you know, were just told about the ages, all that kind of stuff. But the 911 operator said, yeah, you should have had them call the police before this got escalated and stuff like that. And I'm like, you know, it isn't something that usually happens to call. Really, you're going to call the police because you're in a restaurant and some child is screaming and some mothers are talking really loud. It doesn't make any sense. So I don't know if she was being, you know, whatever. But with them chasing me, yeah, chasing me in their truck, and I'm driving down the road and they're chasing me, yeah, that's when I would call. What do you think? Anyway, this whole situation all around, what would you have done? Seriously, leave a comment below this video on YouTube and let me know, and I'll talk to y'all later.